Oh, didn't mean to have that shared up there. Hold on, let me remove that. Sorry if that scared you, Hive. I didn't want to make you all think that
Yeah.
Lauren Boebert was actually going to be here with us tonight.
Yeah.
If we were, we'd let the wolves eat her because she's trying to get them all killed.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, my beauties and bees. Let me know if you can hear me. If you can hear Ring, say something. Ring,
Oh,
say. There
yeah.
we go.
So I mean, I can definitely hear you, Bree. So
All right. Sounds
like,
like we are good on
I
production
think,
side.
like, I think we got the muted problem taken care of before we streamed.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So, welcome to the Hive, and welcome all my guests out there at the live stream as well. All you guys, all the
Yeah.
love, to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was supposed to be for last night, but I'm dealing with new medications. I'm not going to be too forward about it, but it's making my sleep patterns all weird, and I'm glad we were able to reschedule and get this in. And Ring has time to do it because
Yeah.
Ring says that they disagree about some of the stuff I'd said about the wolf conservation efforts and whatnot in the western United States, and we're gonna break that down. But before we do anything, before we delve into the actual topic, tell my people who you are, where they can find you, and
Yeah.
what you do.
So I'm 1Ring42. I don't. Oh yeah, I have been on this channel before when we talked about the giant spider archetype in media. Most of what I do nowadays is media musings because streaming is easy and I've got a full work life, so I don't really have much time for edited content. But the best summary of what I do on my channel is I advocate for media literacy, partially by modeling it, via media musings. And also I comment on political things when I feel like I have the experience to draw from, to comment on them. Usually it means I'm putting on my Army Intel analyst hat back on and talking about terrorism. There is a playlist on my channel that's called Analyst Ring, and it's all me just like, here's why Afghanistan was going to blow up and Jimmy Snow was wrong for putting it all on Biden, Here,
Yeah.
and it looks like the Republicans are trying to put together an impeachment commission to to try and get Biden impeached over the Afghanistan withdrawal, which is lovely. Or, Putin was going to invade Ukraine anyways. Here's a 2-hour-long stream about why. So yeah, it's mainly media stuff. There with a little bit of atheism and a little bit of military geopolitical analysis thrown in.
All right. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and discuss this topic with me.
Yeah.
I'm interested in in taking in your perspective and understanding your point of view on things. So I said a lot of things in that video about wolves, and I watched it back through. I talked about the mischaracterization that Lauren Boebert was giving in her presentation about wolves and their behavior. So I discussed that. I also talked about about my opposition to free range cattle farming.
Yep.
Which I stand by. I think livestock predation is a non-issue. I think it's irrelevant to the topic, and I think that our nation can afford to compensate farmers for that. So I don't think that's I think it's a non-starter. And when we do turn the power over to the states to monitor and maintain wildlife.
Yeah.
Livestock too, but when we call them to maintain wildlife, they always do it from a position of personal interest and not preservation of the species and extirpate them. I have examples of that as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I will say that, and you know, my main issue with your response in the video is that I feel lacked nuance. I largely agree with the general scope, the general what's the word? The general not idea, but sorry, my brain's not giving me the word. The general vibe, for lack of a better, because my brain isn't giving me the actual word I want. The general vibe of your argument, I agree with that, but I do feel like it does lack, it does lack some nuance, and it does lack what I would call an insider perspective. Because as I mentioned, before we went live, there are some things that, coming into this discussion as someone who grew up in Montana, who had never been, further east than Great Falls, Montana, who had never left the Rocky Mountain area until I shipped out to Fort Sill. There is a bit of perspective that I felt you were kind of missing.
Okay. Yeah. So about the Western culture, about the people who live there?
Yes.
Okay. Let's explore that.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before we went live, going as far back as the mid 2000s, and possibly even further back, but mid 2000s is as far back as I was politically aware, because 90s kid.
We grew up in a surplus era.
Yeah.
My childhood in the 90s was pretty. My family wasn't super rich, but it was pretty dope. I mean, we had a swimming pool. I was happy. I did know we were lower class, but we weren't poor. Actually, we
Well,
moved from lower class to being upper middle class during my lifetime because of the
yeah,
surplus in the 90s. They were able to buy a
like
house and stuff like that. So yeah, we grew up in me and you grew up in more. I think we grew up in more of the same type of world than you might think. I grew up in
yeah.
Missouri, in rural
But
Missouri.
yeah, but growing up, well, I mean, growing up, I ate a lot more. Like I had more venison and elk growing up than I had like beef because it was venison and elk that was at the food bank.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember going to the food banks too. And yeah,
Yeah,
hunters would donate to the food banks every year.
yeah,
But it was all only whitetail here, though it wasn't ever. We don't have elk anymore.
yeah,
That's another thing, and that's another example that I want to point out when
yeah,
I talk about these topics. If you want to know what the damage it can do to that agriculture can do to the landscape, look no further than the Mississippi Valley. It's destroyed. I mean, it's never coming back. That big
yeah,
giant forest that ran all the way from Minnesota to Louisiana, gone. Like it's never coming back.
yeah.
Um,
Like what's the quote? Like a squirrel could go from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi without touching the ground.
yeah, yeah, yep. That's what they used to say. Across the whole
Yeah,
Appalachian mountain chain and all the way to the Mississippi without ever touching the ground.
yeah. And up until recently, because unfortunately, Montana has taken a sharp turn for the MAGA Christo fascist norm, like right before I left. So I got out at like just the right time. Um, like Montana in particular was very proud of of how they of how they've kept their wilderness wild. Um,
That's the angle that we should take
yeah,
when approaching this too. Is the hey, why don't you support your wildlife and be proud of it and tell the world this is the way that our state is. We take pride in our wildlife. We take pride in the diversity of animals we have here.
yeah.
Why the hate for wolves? Wolves are a natural part of the ecosystem in those states. Why ring? Why?
Um, and yeah, and so the thing is, like how abortion is on or how abortion was until recently on the national scale, because it kind of, at least to my perspective, got like the abortion issue got recently replaced by the LGBT trans issue. How that was
Yes.
the big wedge issue on the national stage. The wolves were like are like I said, like even back in the mid 2000s, the wolves have been a big wedge issue in the western states. Um, and there are there's the whole
Is
there
it
are a bunch of stupid
so? Are wolves the
anti-wolf
spearhead,
arguments.
or are wolves? It's not just about wolves though. There's more to
Yeah,
it than wolves. Most of there's other wildlife that's tied to this bill,
yeah.
right? There's other wildlife that's tied that are going to feel this bill because wolves do more than just predate livestock. They perform a greater function. But go on.
Yeah. Um, so like a bunch of the stupid anti-wolf arguments that there are, the wolves kill cattle, the wolves kill livestock. Well, the argument is, the thing for that is, hire people to watch your livestock, figure out a way, like there's like a cougar a mountain lion or a grizzly bear will go after livestock if they get the chance, and you're not complaining about that, and we're talking about animals that are very much in the same range, like nearly every year growing up there have been a mountain lion scare in the suburbs around the city I grew up in. And then there's it's making hunting harder because the wolves are changing the behavior of the game. That's a you issue. That's a suck it up buttercut issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, adjust to the animals being aware. Sorry, they have that's the. I don't want to compare it to the murder hornets thing that people complain about, because bees are the same as cows. They're free range livestock. Yeah. So
and Purple has a good point in the chat about
Montana?
the deer herds increasing after the wolves being reintroduced into Yellowstone. Like I remember getting into a fight with my youth pastor over the wolves in Yellowstone,
wolves.
Over the Yellowstone wolves. And that leads into the last stupid argument, because it's literally just a conspiracy theory, is that the stupid anti-wolf argument is that, oh, they're not American wolves, they're they're Canadian wolves, which is a more aggressive subspecies.
Well,
yeah.
So, what though? We extirpated the indigenous population. They're never coming back. So, we have in Montana. The wolves in Montana are going to be closer to Canadian wolves than they are going to be to, Mexican wolves and stuff.
Yeah,
that are still around.
Well, and like I said, that's literally just as far as I'm aware, that's just a conspiracy theory.
So Montana's doing pretty good. They have about 1,000 wolves, but the last when they deregulated wolf hunting in Montana, during the Trump era, in an open season, they extirpated 40% of the wolf population. Out of 1,000 wolves, that's 400 wolves that they killed in one season. A single season. Wisconsin killed 30 other wolves in one season.
Yeah. Now, so it's my opinion.
And let me just add in there, and those are just the ones that are reported on. I grew up in Missouri. I know how you do what you do with big predators. I didn't see it, but I know somebody killed the mountain lion that was out in the hills behind our property and buried it. We don't have any proof of it, but
or in the Lauren Boebert video where she's going about the dogs that were killed by allegedly killed by wolves, that were probably killed by wolves. Like, growing up, especially spending a lot of the time near the edge of near the city edge in Montana, it's like in summer or like in fall, you know to dispose of your garbage right away, because it'll attract bears. If you get if you have a small dog, you don't let it outside unless you're keeping constant supervision on it, because there are great horned owls out there that'll try and grab them. So that is an owner issue. But the thing is, conservation, and we've seen this in Africa as well. conservation efforts do not succeed without local support.
Right. So I am not above there being a level.
Yeah.
But I don't think that this is the level.
Yeah, well,
I don't
honestly,
think that 1,000 wolves is the level.
oh yeah, oh no, yeah, no. Like,
What's the wolf population in
and
Colorado
I
right now?
think, like, I think the also, if I remember right, like when they were delisted under Trump, that was a, Trump ordering FWP to do it. It wasn't a following the science. It was a, this will win me conservative votes in the West. Because it is largely the conservative bloc that tends to be anti-wolf.
There's not even enough to get a count on it. It seems to be there's a lot of sources are saying they can't provide accurate or up-to-date data. It just says that there's as many as 6 packs. So the estimates are, that I see, are somewhere between 50 and 200 wolves in the state of Colorado. That is not a healthy population.
Yeah.
By any means, 200 wolves is not enough to even consider. Let me see here, but it talks about Yellowstone, where there's a lot more though, and the Yellowstone wolves will venture into Colorado and into Montana.
Yeah.
They do. It's where, especially in Montana, some of the ones that are killed that were killed during that wolf hunting season were the Yellowstone wolves. Let me see here.
And it is, like, very much my opinion that, like, the goal of, a conservation effort under the Endangered Species Act should be eventual delistment. Like, you should get the population to a point where there needs to be human predation to keep it stable. In my opinion.
Yeah. Well, my thing is, these are some of the last remaining wild expanses in the U.S. that we're talking about here. I know you're talking about local support, but the local support also comes with, the local support's not there to support the wildlife. They're there to keep the land maintained under these open grazing laws to allow them to keep their cattle on these acres and acres of land, and then they want to say, hey, no, we can't have wolves here because we want to graze our cattle here.
Yeah. Now there has to be a bit of balance for that, because as far as I'm aware, like a lot of the, conservation programs have to be funded, and as far as I'm aware, a good chunk of those permit lands go to, or permit, that permit money goes to helping fund, conservation efforts. In fact, the reason Montana has no sales tax is because it makes so much off of out of state hunters, and it basically goes back into the state, which fosters, I think, for the most, this may just be state pride talking. And I admit that this may just be state pride talking, but I feel that really fosters the pride that Montana in particular has had, because, like I said, it's taken a it's taken a sharp turn for the fuck the environment MAGA mainstream recently, had for protecting its wildlands and protecting public access to public lands. Like if you want to go out and hike in federal, on federal land, you have the right to go do that. I mean, if you want to go out camping, you'll probably have to pay a pittance, to camp at a campground in a national forest, but you have the right to go do that. You don't have to ask permission. You like I said earlier before we started, the attitude very much is public access to public land was, very much like sacrosanct, even above the Second Amendment.
So, when we think of Montana, generally, I mean, I do anyway. I can't speak for everybody out there. We generally do think of the pristine wildlife and untouched lands, not the acres of cow patties and trampled terrain. I mean, I agree with having land that's public domain and open for people to use, but I don't think that one of those uses that should be allowed is to naturalize invasive species there, like cows. I think that should be where we draw the line. If they're not natural to the region, you can't keep them there as if they live there. I don't think it's healthy for the environment. Matter of fact, I think it has an adverse effect on the environment. I think we've seen that. Now, if they want to try maintaining herds of bison on those lands, that'd be freaking amazing. And there's money to be made there.
And there are actually quite a few bison ranges in Montana.
I would even support hunting bison on that land.
Straight up farming them.
Yeah. Farming them like cattle. Yeah, you can do that too.
If you get bison meat at in a restaurant or something, those bison were farmed.
Yeah, they're not wild bison that somebody caught, but I'm talking about having with the way they free range cattle, free range bison like that.
Yeah, they do that.
Yeah, that's definitely favorable than doing it so with invasive cattle, in my opinion. And it's better for them. It's better for the environment and the other animals that live in the environment too.
Now, I can't say how long this will last because Gianforte has been working to put the kibosh on it. But for a long while, Montana had a policy where, say you owned a ranch and you were getting behind on your payment, on your bank loans and such, you could apply to the state and say, hey, I'm going to put this under minimum use and essentially let it go rewild. I'm going to let it go wild again. Only use it for cattle grazing, but otherwise leave it untouched. And then in return for granting that essentially in perpetuity, that it will go back to the wild, or that it will be rewilded with a certain minimum amount of usage, the state would pay off the loans for the ranchers and, give them a stipend.
Yeah, they do that here too. So that's a program. Those are programs I'm familiar with. Just paying to let the land grow back. But here they don't let you have cattle or anything on it. You got to leave it untouched. As far as I know, I mean, there's no free range cattle in the states that I lived in. No, I've been to a lot of states with free range cattle. Though most of the Rocky Mountain states allow for it.
And and I will say that if it's a choice between, free range cattle and factory farming, I'd rather have the free range cattle.
It's better for the cattle for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's better for the cattle, and it's probably better for emissions.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I haven't looked into the emissions numbers on factory farming, but I know that that they're awful.
They're like a lot of greenhouse gases come from methane from factory farming.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That sounds right. I'm deeply adverse to factory farming. I don't have an alternative solution other than people need to stop eating so much damn meat. That's my resolution to it. Because if you look into it, and this, I got this from medical studies. Is that how we grew up with a food pyramid with the big servings of meat at the bottom?
Yeah,
that's BS. That's just creative. That's factually incorrect about what we need for our diet. You don't need, if you eat red meat at all, you don't need any of it. If you eat red meat at all, you shouldn't eat it more than 2 to 3 times a week.
And not
3 meals a day.
And I do agree that we are farming way too much meat. But the problem, but the thing is, we can't immediately just cut, we can't Thanos snap away, because then we've got all these
Give me
animals.
the gauntlet and we'll find out if we can do that. I'll tell you right now, I'd snap.
So say we Thanos snap away, America's meat consumption.
Oh, I thought it had to be the Marvel universe, not this one. Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah. So say we Thanos snap away America's meat consumption. Then we've still got millions of livestock who are, who have been bred for generations to be, big, dumb walking slabs of meat, essentially, right. Because that's what we made, that's what we genetically made them into being through centuries of breeding.
And they can just be whittled down to like the level of like a house, every family can have a little animal in their own care to get milk from and stuff like that. That'd be kind of sweet, like an old timey farm.
Yeah. But so even cutting back, even assuming we can get every American on board with cutting back on
meat consumption.
We need to do it slowly and gradually to minimize the waste, because if we Thanos snap meat demand away, there's a lot of meat that'll just go to waste. And we need to gradually cut back on the amount of, livestock being farmed, because once again, we've got millions of walking slabs of meat that aren't good, that aren't even good for their own survival because we've bred them like that. And also, we'll need to have a social welfare net for the people, for the little farmers who those walking slabs of meat are their livelihood.
Yeah, well, I understand that. Like, I work in an industry that's dependent on health insurance existing, but it does not mean that I don't want to live in a world where health insurance isn't necessary because we have socialized medicine. I'd give my livelihood in that same snap, just to be able to afford a world that didn't have to worry about healthcare liability, right?
Yeah, so, we're reaching a point where the problem of the discussion isn't the meat, it's the capitalism.
Right, yeah. So that's basically what it's going to come down to. Let's just do away with that. right?
Yeah.
That's causing all kinds of problems. But then when you do away with capitalism, and you get, I promise that the Western states here are going to go full anarchy and be, they're not going to go socialist. They're going to go. You're going to have little militia tribes of people that raise
Yeah.
cattle and have these little private cattle industries that are protecting grazing lands at the point of a gun, like the Bundy Ranch people tried to do, even though it was on state-owned property, even though it was already in a place where that was the expectation, right?
But yeah. Now, I like ideally, like here, like say if I were suddenly given charge of Congress and given charge of Fish and Wildlife and Parks, like uh here's my my imperfect suggestion for how conservation like should be run. Um like ideally it should be like a regional thing. So get like basically get, you know, Washington, Idaho, Montana, Colorado, you know, Utah, maybe a little bit in Northern California and Oregon, like it like into a voting, you know, into a voting block so that the locals feel like they have agency in, you know, in their wildlife conservation programs, because local agency is so important to the success of wildlife conservation programs. But, you know, have, you know, actual fish and wildlife park personnel integrated into the decision making progress so you can, you know, like follow the, so that this board will, you know, follow the actual wildlife count statistics and population dynamics, and basically have it done on a regional level where like we have the best happy medium between local participation and the fact that animals don't give a damn about, you know, don't give a damn about our borders.
Right. Yeah, those wolves, it's
Because if,
first come, first serve. They don't know why you're even mad about it. It's like, we got to this cow before you. What the hell?
yeah,
What's your
because
problem,
like
dude?
if you like say if you do leave it on a state
Yeah.
and reservation level, you're gonna you're gonna get a mishmash Frankenstein patchwork that is not gonna actually work for these animals that need massive ranges of, you know, habitat. So you do need a happy middle between an overarching area and local participation, and I think doing it regionally is probably the best bet for that.
So, when you lived in this area, like,
Yeah.
I know you didn't live in Colorado, but you lived in
Yeah.
Montana.
Yeah, I
Um,
lived in like western Montana from the time I turned 6 up it like from the time I turned 7 up until like last year, discounting my stint in the army.
so, when you all the time you lived in Montana, did you actually see any wolves?
In the wild, no, but there was a wolf rehabilitation center like just outside of town that we visited a couple times.
All right. Did you see any cows?
Uh, yeah, yes. So here's a funny story. So, um, this was from before I was born, but my parents had some friends who were living in Alaska, right? And their kids grew up in Alaska. And so when their kids came down to visit, you know, when their kids came down to visit, they they decided to take him out to the bison range to, go see the wildlife there. And they're like, when like when there was like an elk or a deer, nearby the, nearby the cow, is total yawn, because they're from Alaska. But when they drove by the cow ranch, on the way to and from, they're like, look at the cows.
So they were just not impressed. They have bison in Alaska, don't they?
I'm not sure if they do. It might not have been the bison range. It might have been like some other like.
Yeah, but I get that we have a lot more diverse cows, like colorations and patterns and hair length and all that stuff. I do like fancy cows; they're adorable. It's like dogs. That's what I was saying this morning. I was in James Apperson's stream when I was talking to him about domestication and how cows aren't real, right? Like you can't just we just let cows be and left them alone. There would be feral cattle for a few generations, but whatever came out of that at the end over a few million years isn't going to be a cow. It's going to go back to being something more like an auroch, just because
and I think there have been a couple a couple of attempts to breed cows back to something that would at least look like an aurochs.
Yeah. Thank you, Brucifer. I appreciate you. Always happy to see you in the side chat, dropping that love. Yeah. Thank you, dear. Yeah. So
now I will say, the only livestock I have seen were fenced in on a ranch.
Yeah. There's a lot of cattle farms around here. Yeah. We don't have there's some that they call them hog consignments. They're really just factory farms for hogs, but there's a few of those in the region. Some poultry farms, which are also factory farms. I don't know of any cattle factory farms. I'm sure they exist. I just don't know where they're at. They vote on the hog consignments though, on at the county level to put one in here or there, because the effect they have on the land value is pretty detrimental generally, because it ruins the ground or seeps into the groundwater and
So there is one big issue with the cattle, especially down in eastern Montana, is that there have been problems with cattle diseases crossing over to the Yellowstone bison population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've heard hoof and mouth disease and
that pops up every few years, and there's usually a big to do in the local papers about that.
Yeah.
And I can't I think the the response to that is a cattle cull, because they don't want the disease affecting the bison.
Well, I'm glad to hear that they at least appreciate and respect their bison enough to want to make sure that they're maintained. Wolves are wonderful creatures. I don't understand people like Lauren Boebert who want to eradicate them. I don't understand the people who don't want to allow for the population to recover before removing them from the endangered species list.
Now, I can't say this for certain because I haven't actually looked into Lauren Boebert's,
trust the
biography.
Science, Bill.
Well, biography. But if I were to bet anything, I'd say that like she's probably an out of stater signaling to her rural constituents for re-election. Like it, because
How wicked is it of them to name that trust the science bill when the
yeah,
scientific experts every time they have a scientific expert come in to talk about it, they say, "Oh no, you can't hunt this population yet. They aren't recovered."
yeah,
Wolves will recover. They will if we leave them alone. Wolves
yeah,
like to make baby wolves. It's one of their favorite things to do. So
and like and they're like for instance, like there are parts that there are areas in Montana where like the grizzlies are recovered enough, not for a general general hunting season, but for a raffle hunting season, where they'll like
good
you
call.
know
She was born in Florida.
yep,
When she was
because
12, they moved to Denver. No.
yep, I, like like I said, I like I'm coming from I'm coming into this from the perspective of someone who grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Like before we moved to Montana, we were growing up in we were in Washington.
Yeah, Western Washington's basically just
Yeah.
Idaho.
You mean Eastern Washington,
Oh yeah,
Western
Eastern Washington. Yeah, what I
yeah,
say? I just said it backwards. Yes.
yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
Idaho is about as bad as anywhere else when it comes to their treatment of wolves and other wildlife. You don't hear too much of them complaining about cougars, but they'll kill them if they see them.
Uh, yeah, and well, like I said, like they're like once every couple of years there are neighborhoods in Missoula where kids aren't allowed to go alone, out alone at all. Like they've got to walk in groups, not because of like gang violence or anything, but because there are mountain lions in those woods.
Yeah. And that's like
uh,
right on the edge, right coming into the city, into one of the biggest cities in the biggest city in the state of Missoula.
yeah,
Bozeman's pretty big too. But not I say pretty big. I mean, pretty big for Bozeman, for Montana.
yeah.
I do, like I was talking about the work I do. A lot of it's done with the state of Montana, so I'm familiar
Yeah,
with some of their stuff.
yeah, Missoula's got like a population of like 80,000, 80 something thousand, and a lot of that is mostly seasonal because it's a college town.
Yeah, it's funny because like the town I live in right now is 60,000, and people probably haven't
Yeah,
even ever heard of it. So it's because
yeah,
it's in Illinois. It's like not even on the list of biggest cities in Illinois.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on the hour now. I did want to give you a second chance to plug yourself and see if I can get someone to drop a link for your channel in the chat there, so people can follow your
Yeah.
content and what have you. But do you have any final words on the topic as well? By the way.
Final words on the topic. I haven't actually said it during the stream, but I will say it now because we are touching on Lone Brobert. She is the one member of Congress that I will unequivocally say is a terrorist.
Yeah.
So, so if you didn't get the sense that I was anti what Boebert was proposing, uh, I don't think I can say it any plainer than that. But like like I said, overall, I am very pro, very pro wolf in politics terms,
Me
but
too.
I do feel like you have to account, because unfortunately human like even if we dial back our impact to like something akin to hunter gatherers, we still have an impact on the environment, and you have to account for the interplay of humanity, of human society and the environment when you're crafting conservation programs.
Yeah, there's
And
a notion to appeal. Sorry, I couldn't. You were finishing up. Go ahead.
yeah, and so you can't, like, there is there is nuance and pragmatism that has to be accounted for when talking wildlife conservation. Like, for instance, how despite how paradoxical it seems, like, in certain cases trophy hunting actually helps conservation. Because
Yeah, I talked about that a bit in my elephant video. So
yeah.
all right.
And yep. As for my channel, it's mostly advocating for media literacy. There's a bit of atheism in there, and like I said, when a political issue that I feel like I have relevant experience to speak on pops up, I will do a video about it. Usually that's geopolitics and like and intel analyst terrorism stuff.
All
But
right.
yeah, it's okay. Jason Jacoby did say something in the chat that I do have to address in regards to my comment on Bobert being a terrorist. Yes, Bobert hasn't placed any IEDs, but during January 6th, which was a terrorist attack, she did leak out the locations of Congress as they were being evacuated onto Twitter. In my book, that is aiding and abetting a terrorist attack, and in my book, that makes her a terrorist.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of the topics that I talk about on Gaia Talk. If you all enjoyed this, let me know by hitting the thumbs up button, because I like to talk about conservation and wildlife management over here is kind of my main squeeze. So these streams will be more regular. I'm going to mix them in at Saturdays and Sundays as my time's available and as my guests' times are available. So sometimes you might see Gaia Talk during the week, or What's the Buzz during the week, depending on the topic at hand. So, that's pretty much all I have to say about this topic. I'm sure I'll revisit it as this bill moves forward, and we see what comes of the situation and how it's going to impact us globally. I'm going to start trying to keep a closer eye on some of the conservation efforts that are being done out there in the world and put a spotlight on them here. So thank you everybody for dropping in and hanging out, and please remember to be kind and take care, and we will see you next time.